Hi, and welcome to Connected Conversations for Creatives. I'm your host, Jennifer Carr, and this is part two of my connected conversation with tax professional Kristin Delfau.
And you understand you understand what that should look like. It helps move you along and makes the process easier. And also you can see where you're spending, right? Because if you're dropping $5,000 on advertising and you're not getting $5,000 of revenue out of that advertising, it might be time to switch it up. That's the other important part about keeping track of these things. It's not just purely for taxes, but it's to understand what's working and what's not working in our business.
Yes, that's good. Which leads me literally into the first question of the Q&A. Like, these were just some questions that when I threw it out there was a net cast, and it was like, these were the most, I think it was like 9 or 10 of the top questions that kind of came in. And some of them were similar. But the first one was like, what are the key financial records I should be keeping for this was specific to an author, for my writing business, but I guess that's true for any independent contractor or artist or anything like that.
So you need to be keeping it in broad terms, your income and your expenses. And so you want to make sure that you've got your bank statements so that you can back it up. And we're going to talk a little bit later about how you're going to track these things. So I know we're going to get into this, but you need to keep record of your income. You need to keep records of your expenses. You need to keep records of your mileage. Because if you're driving to events, and you don't have to be fancy about that. Like, I do mine still, I could do it in QuickBooks, but I do it in Excel. I just keep a little log. It's like, okay, this is where I drove. This is what I did. And you do the back and forth. Yeah, you want to keep your income, your expenses, your mileage. Those are the big ones, right? In terms of tracking those financials and those expenses. Again, if we have a separate business checking account and a separate business credit card, that'll be pretty straightforward because the income's going to be here and the expenses are going to be over here. Now, every so often there are expenses you pay directly out of your business checking account. Okay, fine. But the bulk of it will probably be on a credit card. And also, you're going to want to keep the receipts backing up that credit card. Keep them digitally, because like 90% of what we buy anymore is online anyway. Mm-hmm. So just keep a little folder for the year and depending on how reoccurring your expenses are, you may want to break it down into monthly folders so it doesn't look like, oh my God, there's this giant blob of data. So every year I start a new little folder, like 2023, January, February, March, whatever. And so everything is broken out by month, which is less painful for me. Again, not everybody works the same way, but that is really helpful. And also because, like, for me, I get behind. So I'm sure there's some people listening to this like, oh my God, I haven't recorded any expenses and it is October. Well, let me just tell you, as a tax person, I usually don't reconcile my books from January to May, and I do it in May because I'm busy and I'm tired. So I understand your pain, and I try every year to be better at it. And some years I get better and most years I don't. So I'm with you, but you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. And then it's a conscientious effort. Like, you have to sit down, or a conscious effort. You have to sit down and be like, this is what I'm going to do. And you set yourself reminders. Like, if I didn't have reminders on my phone and in 3 different planners, then nothing would ever get done. And so just to have those constant reminders, or, if you really want to get on top of things, I have started, like, every time I make an online purchase, I flag the order email, like the email, and when it comes in, I'm like, oh, flag with a certain color flag, so that when it comes time to go back and print all of my receipts, because I could just print them then, but I don't always have my folder there. But I have that system where I know as soon as the order confirmation comes in, flag, and so it's all under one color flag at the end of the year when I need to print them all. My husband really loves when he gets my folder because it is kind of big. But
we're going to talk about how to eliminate your folder. We are going to eliminate folder.
I'm sitting on it. The more digital, the better.
Yeah. So one thing I would suggest when I say folders, I meant digital folder, online folder, not printout folder, because I used to do that. Mm-hmm. And another counselor, she's like, Kristin, what are you doing? I'm like, I know, but I'm set in my way. So I stopped doing it. So here's how you do it. You get a folder and you put it on your desktop. And like I said, you have 2023, and then you go month by month. And as soon as you make that purchase, you just print that email to the folder. And then it's done.
Smart. Yeah, that's smart. I like that.
It makes it easier. And then we're going to talk about reconciling credit cards and bank accounts to make your life even easier. Because then you don't have the dreaded folder. Oh,
out of sight, out of mind, right? Because I have my folder and then I hand it over and I don't think about it again. I'm just like, it's all Happy Christmas,
Yeah. Well, one thing you can do, and I was going to talk about this when we get to bookkeeping stuff. There are a couple of things that you can do so it's not like end of the year. And also, here's the other point about waiting until the end of the year is you don't know where you are at any given time.
That's true.
That's what's hard, because it's hard to make good business decisions because you kind of have an idea of what your revenue is. You kind of have an idea what your expenses are, but you're not seeing it in front of you. So you kind of end up just, keep going along. But it's so much easier to make good business decisions when you have data, even if it's just quarterly, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to go month to month or week to week. Some businesses do, but in the creative space, not so much. I don't think, unless depending on what you're doing, right? But the point is that in my program, I actually built an Excel sheet for people and locked a pile of cells. And I actually just had it translated over to numbers because a lot of creative people work in Mac, and I found somebody to do that because I can't do that. Just so, and it builds a profit and loss statement for you. So you know where you are and you manually enter that in. But if in your case, what I would suggest is if you don't want to go to QuickBooks and have to pay for QuickBooks and do the bookkeeper thing, you could always use something like Wave. Have you heard of Wave?
Have not.
Okay. Take a look at it. So Wave is good for when you're, in this creative space where it'll just download everything and it'll give you profit and loss and all those sorts of things. It's an app. It was bought, I don't know if Block bought it. I think H&R Block bought it, but I don't remember. Somebody bought them. And so you can track, and it'll digitally do everything for you. So you're, in your case, your husband isn't sitting there trying to enter all your income and expenses. It'll just track it. And that would probably make your life a little easier and his life a little easier. Wave doesn't translate very well to QuickBooks when you get there. Another one that a client of mine has been using is HoneyBook.
I have heard of that one.
Yeah, and she's creative, but she's not a writer. She's in a different space. But HoneyBook, I think, is maybe starting to do profit and loss statements now and showing income and expenses. So if you're invoicing for work through HoneyBook, it seems to be able to do that. I can't speak to it 100% because I know it was an add-on feature. I think they did it over the summer. But Wave is a good starting place because there's an automation of the information, and they don't charge you unless you, at this point anyway, again, these products are always changing, but unless you're running invoices through their system. Other than that, it's just, it's downloading and categorizing. So that, and when your money and your time is short, that's a good place to start. It's not a perfect solution. And I will tell you, in anything, as in life, when it comes to taxes, there are trade-offs and there are no perfect solutions. But when you're bootstrapping it, which is, a lot of being what a creative is, that's probably a good place to start.
Okay, awesome. And so when we're tracking our expenses, is it beneficial to track them under like categories to be like, okay, here's an expense, and it's just like to automatically categorize them every time?
Yep. So let's just say you're paying, I don't know, you have a website, you're paying WordPress. Pretty common, right? Advertising. So every time WordPress is billing you monthly, or if you're paying monthly, then it just gets all stuck into the advertising folder.
Nice.
And now you don't even have to think about it. It's done.
That's awesome. I will say that I have found, we have a little local bank that I opened my business checking account with, and it automatically, the online thing has, like, it will automatically categorize for me. I can go in and change it if they get it wrong. Yeah, I know. I was like, what's this mean? It was very cool. And so I can go in, like, if it's an Amazon purchase, and I'm like, ooh, that was for this, but they just say shopping. And I'm like, let me edit that. And so I can categorize it through my bank statement. And so then I can download at the end of the year or whatever, my little spreadsheet. I was like,
that is super fancy. I like that.
No, it's very surprising because it's not a big bank. It is literally a local bank. It is somebody. And I was like, well, thank you for this.
Ooh, that's really cool. So, and another thing I wanted to mention, it's something I started doing for myself, which I don't know why I didn't do it earlier, but it is what it is, right? I started picking one day of the month. I looked at all of our bills and when they're due and all of this, and I picked one day of the month that worked for me. Now, this won't work for everybody, but I'm just throwing it out there, that I pay all the bills on that day because everything's roughly going to be due before that date. And so I know for us, the 20th of the month is the day that I sit down to pay bills. And this way I don't miss anything. So
Yeah.
For what it's worth, if that helps anybody, it took me many years to come to that conclusion, but that's what I do.
No, it's valid. I do, like, every Monday is like an admin day. Like if I have, a scheduled call or something, I work around it, but that is my administration day. I don't do any writing that day. I try to do as much of the office stuff that I have to do and organizing and scheduling and all that stuff on Mondays, because that takes it out of the rest of the week or, whatever. So scheduling something like that, saying this is the day that I'm focusing on this, one, it's going to get done. And two, not to schedule anything else on that day until it's done.
Yep, exactly. And you can pick a day. I used to do that with my bills, and then I got out of it, just kind of got wonky on me. So I just decided I pick a bill pay day, and yeah, I do admin time blocks. I used to do them on Mondays, but then I realized that my clients email me on Sunday nights, so that kind of like pushed it to Tuesday.
Yeah.
So I hear you. So yeah, there to go about this, but you just find a system that you can stick with and works for you.
Yes. And it's okay to change systems, like find what works for you, because we are all so different and we process things so differently that just because somebody said, this is the way to do it. I was talking to somebody yesterday and he was saying that, I tout these systems and these strategies. And I'm like, yeah, but what if some of us are, INTJs and you're an ESFP personality style? Like, how is that strategy going to work for that personality? And he was like, I don't know. And I'm like, then it's not a one size fits all situation. It's okay to change.
So when you add different variables to it, like how you handle something as a single person versus how you handle something when you're married or you have a partner or you have kids or pets or whatever, it's all going to be really different. So we just have to kind of learn to, even tax people have to learn to go with the flow because we're going to be rigid. Woo! We like things in our boxes. Don't move our boxes. So
Your little Excel spreadsheet boxes.
I love Excel spreadsheet. I'm a little Excel junkie. It's like, spreadsheet this. Like my tax friends and I, it's like, hey, do you have a spreadsheet on that? Well, I guess I do. And then the problem becomes is their tax brains don't work the same as my tax brain, so I don't like the organization of the spreadsheet. And they have to redo it. But it's a starting point.
Yeah, exactly. And see, some of us, we see spreadsheets and we're like, what? And I have a few episodes where people have been like, I plan on a spreadsheet. And I'm like, why? Like, spreadsheets are just so not my thing. But again, I married a guy who lives and breathes Excel. And there was one day he called me into the office and he was like, look what my spreadsheet can do. I just did this. And I was like, that's so great, honey. What's a spreadsheet? But
well, my husband did that when we got married, which was now 22 years ago. This is so like pivot tables, which are a function in Excel where you can take a massive amount of data and, aggregate it all into information that you need. I'll never forget, for our wedding, he had all of the people who were attending, and if they wanted chicken, fish, or beef, we put it in a spreadsheet. And then he just did, and now I know how a pivot table works, but at the time it felt like magic. He's like, oh, look, these are the people, this is how many people want chicken, this is how many people want beef, this is how many people want fish. He's like, we can divide it by Americans and French people. I'm like, I don't care. Just give me the number. So, yeah, so I get it. But Excel is very powerful, but it's kind of like our brains. We use about 1% of what it is capable of doing.
Right? But it's also very customizable to however your brain needs to function. It can show you exactly, because I do use spreadsheets for stuff. I really do. Like when it comes to scheduling and that kind of thing and maintaining, like I do use it, but I don't do the pretty things like y'all do.
Well, I don't do pretty. I do functional. But
see, there you go.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's looking at a blank Excel spreadsheet is often like looking at a blank page. You're starting to write and you're like, well, a spreadsheet can be the same way. It's like, okay, what am I trying to convey? So if you can take that same writing attitude toward dealing with Excel, it can be a little less scary and a little less daunting. Like, what am I trying to achieve by looking at all these little boxes? What am I trying to get to? And then again, you can reverse engineer into what you needed to do.
See, that makes so much perfect sense. And I think that when people hear that, they will be a lot less intimidated by something as simple as Excel. And when I say simple, I just mean there's a lot of potential there.
There's a lot of potential, and there's just, even if it's just adding certain things in certain boxes, just if you're uncomfortable with Excel, just start small. And if you mess it up, you can fix it. It's like a bad haircut. It's going to grow out, right? It's not like a bad facelift. That is not going to grow out.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's true. It's like my son got a bad haircut last time because we were not very communicative in what he wanted. And I'm like, yeah, at least you didn't get a bad facelift.
That's right. That's right. One of those things can be fixed. One of them can
be fixed. Not everything can be fixed, but that can be fixed. It just takes time.
Well, that's fantastic. Okay, so the next question was, how should I track and report my income from book sales, royalties, and other sources? Now, I'm not going to lie, like the whole royalties thing, just it boggles my mind, and it's not something that I'm super familiar with. I'm getting there. But how do we track and report something like that? Because it's not consistent. It's not the same across the board from different places.
Yep. So what we're going to do is, again, you're either going to use something like Wave because it's going to import your bank account stuff, or like the spreadsheet that I built. And there I actually, in my spreadsheet, and these services will do it as well, I have it as, sales of product, services, royalties. You can break it all down so that way actually how much you're getting paid from what, right? But the other part of it is, and this is something that not all tax people even do correctly, but it was a point that I wanted to make on this call, is that the thing that creatives need to know is that when you receive royalties, it's still considered self-employment income, even though it's coded as a royalty. Because on a tax return, royalties will go, just because there are other kinds of royalties, right? There are like oil drilling rights, or somebody who invested in a production, they might get royalties from it, but they didn't create it. Those are a different animal. But when you're getting royalties, they are going to be considered self-employment income, just like as if you got paid from publishing an article or an advance from a book. That's all considered, is sales income. You can classify it how you want, but I usually would break it out into sales and then royalties in this situation. And maybe have another category if it's not a book sale, but like you write an article for somebody and they pay you $500. That I would put in a separate category also, so I can see where my revenue is coming from. Like, you might find out that, hey, I really enjoy writing books, but I'm really actually making my money ghostwriting articles for people. And that might make you pivot your business because you're feeding your family or yourself or whomever you're feeding, right? But these are the things, and this is where the data is really, really helpful, because then we can make good decisions throughout the year. Like, hey, I'm going to need to make rent, so I better go crank out a couple more articles because those are the people who are actually paying me. And what's going to happen is that at the end of the year, if anybody pays you more than $600, they're going to send you a 1099. Royalties will send it even if it's like $2, right? You get a little royalty slip. A good friend of mine, before she became an accountant, she was in the film industry and modeling, and we laughed. She's like, oh, I got my check from this movie. It was like $5.60. I'm like, you can maybe get a coffee with that. It's not zero. It's not zero, exactly. But hey, it's something. So you're going to classify all of this, but you'll get 1099s. Now, what's really, really important, now the 1099 is the form that a lot of creatives will know this form. They've seen it. If you get paid over $600, it's going to come to you, or with royalties, what have you, like just a little bit. And you want to make sure that if you're working on your own taxes, that you don't double up. Because if you're tracking all of your income and you're saying, I made 20 grand, and then you get 1099s that say you made 15 grand. Well, you didn't make 35. You made 20, but you only got statements showing you made 15. Yes, you do need to report the full 20, even if people don't send you the form.
Yeah.
If people ask me that, well, I didn't get a 1099 for it. I'm like, yes, but you got paid.
Right. The money was there.
The money was there. Because it's like, people say, well, if I didn't get a 1099, I didn't get paid. I'm like, okay, well, if you go by that logic, my clients don't give me 1099, so I shouldn't declare any of my income. That's not quite how that works. So, but yeah, you declare all your income, but you just want to make sure that you're not doubling it up and reporting more than you actually made.
Okay. So then another tricky subject is this whole sales tax thing. So, you've got all these percentages of stuff, and that, again, it just kind of boggles my mind. So, but the question was, how do you handle the sales tax on self-published books and that kind of thing?
Okay, I can tell you right now, I hate sales tax.
Uh-huh.
It is such a misery. And I have I have personal experience with it because, again, it's not like my clients don't end up needing sales tax returns, but I've dealt with it myself. This is where you might want a bookkeeper because they'll usually do that for you and help you with the sales tax returns. Sales tax, when you're selling through your own website, that's how you need to handle it. But if you're reselling off of Amazon, or not reselling, but you're selling through Amazon or one of these bigger companies, they are supposed to be, and usually are, collecting and dealing with sales tax on your behalf.
Yeah, that whole website thing, because Alabama is the same way with the every county has its own sales tax, and it's good times. Appreciate you.
Yeah, it's wicked, and this is why there are companies out there who do this for particularly product-based businesses. There's one company, the granddaddy of them all is Avalara, and they would handle the sales tax, but it's cost prohibitive. So that's why you're going to find a lot of people selling through places like Amazon or wherever else they're selling their things, because they can take that, and they're going to take a bigger cut, right, than if you're selling it off your website. But they are also dealing with all the administrative crap that comes with it.
Yeah, and it's a toss-up. You kind of have to decide, if you're not selling a ton through your website, I think, you're probably okay. But if you start selling mainly through your website, then that's where you kind of run into the iffy things. At the same time, I really hate the idea of selling through Amazon, which I do. I sell through Amazon too, but like they do take more. You make way less when you sell through Amazon and other retailers.
Yeah, and it's the trade-off is the exposure. That, like we were saying before, everything's a trade-off. So when you sell through them, you lose a lot, right? And the revenue side, they take a huge cut, but you have more potential exposure theoretically because there's so many people on it. So it's kind of that sort of thing. And then Nexus will only kick in other states. So your Nexus is where you sit, but with sales tax, having to collect it in other states where you are not present, those thresholds are usually really high. I think the lowest one is like $50,000 on the sale. There aren't a lot of us creative types out there who are selling $50,000 in any state of our books. So, I mean, if you are, more power to you.
Congratulations.
So happy for you. Yeah. But by and large, the majority of people who are self-publishing are not in that boat, that they are selling in their state. And, I just sold $100,000 in California, so I have to declare my sales tax. That's not usually how these things are working at the levels that we're talking about. And those people who are selling at those levels probably have somebody handling it for them at that point.
There you go. And I'm thinking, that sounds really nice, and it sounds great to make that kind of money from my art. But at the same time, that's a lot of pressure, and I can't imagine what it would take to get to that point.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was actually at a couple of weeks ago, I sat on a financial panel because a couple of authors down here, we had an awesome festival. It's a former newscaster here turned young adult mystery writer. I think she does, it's kind of mystery type stuff. They had a whole festival of young adult writers. It was called YA by the Bay. It was in Tampa. It was at the Tampa Convention Center, and there's like 40 authors there. R.L. Stine was there. So talk about pressure to crank. He's cool. He's pretty chill. He's a nice guy. But I sat on the financial panel because they brought in all the high school kids from the Tampa area, which is Hillsborough County. And we did a financial panel session just talking to them about money and, debt and credit cards and financials and all that kind of stuff. It was really, really cool. But and R.L. Stine being there made me think of that because, how many books did he crank out?
Oh, yeah. And for how many years? Yeah, because he was doing his thing when I was a kid,
But I know. It's so funny. No, but it's the pressure. It's like you have a great book and now you have to follow it up with another one. It's tough.
Yeah, no, I don't want that responsibility. Like, I'm happy with my and I like having, and maybe my mindset will change if ever I find that kind of success, but I really like the intimate community that I build with the people that read my books and other authors who are in the same boat that I'm in. And so I like it, keeping it small. Now, do I want to make money? Absolutely. Would I love for my husband to be able to work from home or not have to work at all? Absolutely, because I get to get lost in my imagination. That would be amazing, but we're not banking on that. He's going to keep his job for now.
Hey, and you know what? I think that's a really important point to bring up in this conversation that if you have a day job and you need that to pay the bills, that's okay. And there is absolutely no shame in that. And there are a lot of people who are like, yeah, I quit my day job and I can do this full time. Good. If they're actually being able to do that, good for them. I'm really happy. But if you're not there yet, it's okay. It's okay to maintain the job with benefits and with time off and financial stability while you're doing your other stuff. It's okay. And it doesn't mean you're a failure because you haven't quit your day job.
Oh, for sure. I actually heard a thing this morning. He was talking about how you may have a job and you may have a passion, and they may not be the same two things, and that's okay, because you can pursue both of them. Both of them are beneficial in their own ways. And so, if art is your passion, by all means, reckless abandon, but also make sure you pay your bills.
and there's no shame in it.
Nope.
If you have to, if you're cranking a target so that you can work on your novel at night, you do what you got to do. And you're not any lesser of a person because you didn't give up the job that's feeding your family so that you could pursue your dream. You can,
right? That's exactly right. Oh, that's exactly right. Okay, so we had a few questions about deductions. And so I'm just going to kind of like run them all together, and you can pick and like however you want to answer them. But so one of them was, are there any tax deductions or credits specifically relevant to independent authors? I guess we can expand that to like creatives in general. Another one was, what expenses can I deduct as an independent author? And you kind of touched on that as, like your mileage and stuff, but are there any that you think of after that? And then one was super specific about tax credits or deductions related to home office expenses for writers.
So I'll just go through as I would on a tax return. I'll give you the order in the tax return. So the things that you're going to see the most frequently in the creative space, in the author space, one of your biggest ones is probably going to be advertising, because that's a massive catch-all. Yeah. It's going to be, literally advertising, but you're also thinking about your website, your business cards, your, ad buys if you're doing it on Facebook, promotions that you're doing or sponsoring events or all of that. That's a big one for this space. Another one that you'll see might be office supplies. Because even though we have computers and things like that, you still may have office supplies. That's another one, of the electronics. If you replace your computer, it's going to be a business expense if you're using it primarily for your business. Another thing will be business memberships or author groups, professional development. And professional development is one of those tricky ones, because people are like, I got life coaching. Well, life coaching for what? Well, to better my life. Well, guess what? That's not a business expense. But if you're going through coaching, specific business coaching to figure out how to market your author writer self, there you go. That's more professional development, because you're trying to, the goal of doing this, of having this coaching, is to create sales. So that's one of them. Another one, there are certain subscriptions. For example, some of my creatives who are more in the musical space, if you will take, if they're buying downloads from Apple or whomever, we will take those as deductions because it is part of their creative process. Some of my theater people who create theater pieces, going to the theater is part of their work. They're not just going for fun. I mean, they might be enjoying it, but they're studying the lighting. They're talking to this. They're looking at that. It's all part of their process. So it can be a bit of a fine line of what you can and can't deduct. Like, for example, like models, real estate agents will say, oh, well, I want to deduct my manicures because my nails have to look nice. Well, no, that's not how that works. But my models who had to have a specific manicure for this particular photo shoot, absolutely. We'll take that, or a specific garment that they had to wear. But that's, again, that's creative, but it's kind of going off a little off track. Coming back to it is accounting and legal fees. So if you engaged in accountant services, that's a deductible business expense. If you did something to incorporate, if you bought one of the packages to protect, your intellectual property, there are a couple of attorneys out there who are doing that sort of work, and they build them as packages so that they are actually, somewhat affordable for normal people. as opposed to going to an attorney directly to build these things out for you. Those kind of things are deductible. Travel, if you're going to an event, never mind your mileage, but if you are at a vendor, you're doing a book show or a trade show, that vendor table, any expenses, if you had to travel and get a hotel, staying overnight in that hotel for that event. What if you're mixing business and pleasure? Well, it needs to be over 50% for business in order for you to count your travel to and from, so your flights to and from. So for example, like I was saying with this YA by the Bay, the event was 2 days, maybe 3 for the there's 3 for the authors, like business days. But if they came for 5 and build a little vacation on the back end, well, they can still take their airfare to and from because they were here more than 50% of the time for business. And then the hotel stay and all of these sorts of things, we can deduct those. Another thing is like Zoom fees, these sorts of subscriptions. Look at the subscriptions that you have and if you're using them for business. And let's see, also related books, like if you're reading books in order to, like, let's say you're reading other books in your genre. Would I have a problem taking that as a deduction? No, because you are working in your genre. So if you're writing YA romance books, I don't even know if that's a category, no clue, because sorry, not my sphere, but or YA vampire books, and you're buying other YA vampire books to get how their vampires work. I would consider that as part of your business because you're not doing it for fun. It's part of the body of work you're trying to produce.
What about things like editor fees? If you're paying your editor and that kind of thing? Okay.
Absolutely. Editor fees, logo fees, cover design, any sort of getting your ISBN number, any commission that you're paying, you have to give back to Amazon if it's not noted. And that you have to be really careful and look at your 1099s and see if they're sending you the 1099 for the gross amount that they collected or the net amount, which is what they gave you.
Interesting. Oh my goodness. See, this is why we have professionals.
This is why we go to a lot of continuing ed.
And for that, we are grateful. Oh my gosh. Okay, so there's a long list, and they can be things that you don't even think about, like, my little whiter outer here, because I use a ton of whiteout tape, and gonna deduct my little dinosaur whiteout.
I like the dinosaur whiteout. But it's like, if you download the free checklist, you'll see the buckets, so it might trigger some things in your brain and go, oh, those supplies. Or what about this? What if you're renting a studio space to write or a co-working space? Because some of my creatives, they just can't work at home. They got to get out of the house. And so that they sublet from somebody or they just rent a room, that's deductible. That's a rent. That's you're renting that space. It's not a home office.
Yeah.
You're paying rent for that space.
Well, and I think also then that probably would also mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like if you're recording your own audiobook and you have to go rent audiobooks, recording space, studio time, and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. All of that stuff. Also, another one that people can tend to forget, and particularly if they're working from a home office, is their internet and their cell phone. So the internet, you have to look at it and say, okay, you have to take your cable TV out, right? What is the pure internet amount? And roughly how much am I using of that for my business? And you take a percentage. Now, it's a little, you kind of have to figure that out, but that is something that you want to look at. And also a portion of your cell phone bill. You may not be, nobody's using, really, let's be honest, nobody's using their cell phone 100% for business, unless it is like a company issued cell phone that you have to use only for business, which is pretty rare anymore, but whatever. But you again, you prorata and you say, okay, well, I use my cell phone probably about 50% for my writing business. So you take 50% of your cell phone bill, or 20% and you take 20%. So you look at it that way and say, okay, this is how, to take those deductions. Did you want to continue on this? Or you want me to move on to home office?
Either way, whatever. I just have those questions.
If you have any other questions, yeah, I'm happy to take them if you think of anything else. Okay. So home office. Now, in order to deduct a home office, and I get all into this in depth and deduct it, not trying to go like, hey, buy my program, but just telling you that I get way into this so people can ask these questions and permutations. Home office, it has to be regular and exclusive use. So are you using your home office regularly and exclusively for your business? And that means that your home office is not also like your guest room, like where people are going to sleep. And if it is your guest room, here's what we do. If you have your desk in there and then you also have like a pull-out bed, we will take the space literally around your desk.
Nice.
We will count that out and how far your chair will roll back, She's like, I have a client who was working out of his basement. His basement is very large, but I'm like, look, dude, I can see your entertainment center back there. I can tell you're not using that for your business. So we're going to just take an actual measured space. Now, in full disclosure, I work very cleanly, as clean as possible within tax code. I am not going to take liberties. Other people will, but I really like to sleep at night and I like my clients not to get letters and notices. So we do things the right way. So what I am telling you here is the right way, per the tax code, not Kristin's right way. It's IRS's right way. So with a home office, it needs to be regular and exclusive use. And what that means, though, also is if you're doing your day job where you have a W-2 from that same office, you're not able to take that as a home office. So it's one of those like kind of weird things. Another thing is that your home office, again, with regular and exclusive use, it can't be your dining room table that you also feed people on. And there's actually a really famous tax court case where this woman, she took it all the way up to tax court and she was using her dining room and she appealed and said, my dining room is my office. And the judge looked at her and said, where do you have Thanksgiving dinner? She said, in my dining room. He's like, go, done. Because it's not regular and exclusive use. So we need to think about these things. But if you can claim regular and exclusive use of your home office, let's say that you do this full time, great. Or you have a W-2 job that takes you out of the house and you're not doing work from that home office. You're doing your writing business work from your home office. Now you can take, if you own your home, you can take a portion, you take a percentage. So you can take a portion of the mortgage, you can take a portion of the property tax, your utilities, your insurance. If you're renting, you can take a portion of your rent. So it creates an extra round of deductions there for you. Or even if you have a store, like I'll even go and say, okay, well, you've got that. If you have a storage closet that you're only storing supplies in, now again, this doesn't always so much apply to writers as it would, well, maybe it does, but more so the other creatives who are actually physically creating things, artists and such. If you have a closet or a storage area that you've got all your stuff in, we take that square footage too, because you're not gonna be able to put your clothes in a place that's filled stacked high with like, paintbrushes and paints and canvases and stuff. So that also counts as home office because it is utilized for the business.
It's awesome. Okay, so that's a great start because it's probably some things that people were like, oh, just count my home guest room that I use, or my dining room table. That used to be a good office space for me, but obviously we never counted it. But sometimes you do what you got to do. So I think we've kind of touched on this. But if you want to speak directly to it, what's the difference between being an independent author and running a business, or is there a difference?
Yeah, and actually, before I jump to that question, I do one other thing about home office because people, will ask me, but isn't that a red flag for IRS that I have a home office? No. The fact in and of itself that it exists is not getting you on some audit watch list. If it's defensible, it's something that's legit, which is why we go through these machinations of figuring out the actual square footage. You have nothing to worry about. So if it's legitimate, take it because it is available.
And that's valid because that is a lot of our fears, because one, all the laws keep changing so frequently, or we just don't understand them. And so we do get in our mind, we're like, this is it. This is how it ends. I'm headed for the IRS jail. That's where I'm going.
Yeah. No. It takes a lot to get to tax jail. It takes a lot of ignoring notices and willful intent. And and before I get into the whole LLC and sole proprietor thing, if you get a notice, open it and go talk to somebody, because the thing is they won't go away. And the more you ostrich, the worse it gets. So just open the sucker. Even it comes up Friday at 5, which IRS is really good at doing for some reason. Like I have that USPS delivery, so you know when you get it. Well, all those notices show up on Friday, right? So when I see them, I'll mention to clients, I'm like, okay, this came, just so you know, if you haven't gotten it yet, I don't want you worrying all weekend. This is all it is. But open the sucker and figure out what it is, because it might be nothing.
But it might be something.
Could be something or could be nothing.
Yeah.
You know, it could be an installment agreement. It could be something. It could be, oh my God, you got hacked. Oh, we found this, whatever. But just open it and read it and then reach out. So if you don't understand what it's saying. Anyway, so going on to your question of if it's different if you are a sole proprietor or if you have an LLC. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions that people have, I'll ask them, so how are you filing? I'm an LLC. Yeah, but what tax status as an LLC? An LLC is not a tax status. It is a legal status. And people get really, really confused. So an LLC is a flexible way of deciding how you want to get taxed. And you can't choose it. You can't change every year. That's not how this works. But you say, I'm an LLC who wants to be taxed as a sole proprietor, which in LLC speak is also called a disregarded entity, which means it goes on that Schedule C that I mentioned in the beginning, ties into your regular tax return, and you move on your way. You can have an LLC that gets taxed as what's called an S Corp. That requires a completely separate tax return. It's it's an 1120. It's going to cost more. You have a lot more reporting requirements. And a side note, there are people who will sell S Corp conversions to everyone. Be very wary of that, because not all businesses need to be an S Corp. Not all businesses should be an S Corp. And always consider the source of who's telling you what and what they're getting paid to tell you, including me, including anybody. Because if they are selling you an S Corp service and you make $5,000 a year net, it's completely pointless. So I wanted to bring that out there. Now, here's the difference between filing in terms of the tax structure. If you file, as your own name or a DBA and as an LLC, the tax deductions, that's another one I hear. Well, if I have an LLC, I can write everything off. Well, it's no different than if you were a sole proprietor, the tax law is the same. So the LLC does a couple of things. The LLC in certain conditions will give you certain protections if you maintain your separate books and records, because if you have an LLC and you're commingling everything in your personal accounts, it's not going to protect much of anything. So it's, separating your business from your personal and creating some potential protection for liability purposes, but I'm not an attorney, can't speak to that. What I would suggest is that also for writers, side note, is consider some sort of an errors and omissions insurance, professional liability insurance. They don't cost a whole lot for writers, but it just protects you just in case somebody sues you. That's really what you're doing. And by the way, it's a business expense. But from a tax perspective, filing as a sole proprietor, filing as an LLC as a disregarded entity, also it's like filing as a sole proprietor. So there's no tax differential. The things that are different also are you are not giving out your social when you're working with people. You're giving out an EIN. So that could be very important to you. Personally, I don't like giving out my socials to people. They don't need them. So if you have an LLC, you can, distinguish that. You can do that as a DBA. I mean, getting an EIN, you go on the IRS website. Mm-hmm. It's not hard. You just read. I mean, maybe it is. It can be very. Let me rephrase that. The questions can be confusing, but if you're working with an accountant, they can walk you through that. And you do need to pay some expensive service, hundreds of dollars to get an EIN, because guess what? It's actually free with IRS. So people need to know that. But really, it's the other thing you do have to watch out, though, with creating an LLC is your state, because every state has different fees for having the LLC. If you're in California, I would encourage you to think long and hard before you do that and why you're doing it. Because the California LLC fee is something like $800 a year. It's a lot of money. So really, if you're in California, think about that one. Connecticut used to have a fee, and then it was every other year, and then they got rid of that, and they had another fee. It's just like so screwy there. In Florida, it's $138 a year for your LLC, so a little bit more reasonable. But every state has different reporting requirements, so you need to be aware of that if you're going to go down that road.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider. And, you have companies out there like LegalZoom and stuff like that, but I have not loved having an experience with LegalZoom. Like, that is not my favorite place to work. And I learned that, in the very beginning. And so you have to find people that know what they're talking about that aren't also going to take you for a ride.
Yeah, and that's really important. Like, before I'd even step foot near LegalZoom, I would talk to my accountant or my bookkeeper or a bookkeeper, because there are bookkeepers, like I work with bookkeepers who they'll either do your books and charge you a monthly fee, or they'll charge you a one-time setup fee, which honestly is probably, if you're going to go the QuickBooks route, it's the best thing you can do for your business is spend that few $100 or whatever they charge for setup fee, because they'll get all of the accounts set up correctly. They'll get the report set up correctly. Maybe you can pay them once a year to spot check it to make sure you didn't screw anything up. And some of them will help you get an EIN if you don't want to work with an accountant. They'll help register you for business taxes that are in your locality, because some places have them. Certain states require you to file also personal property taxes. Virginia, Connecticut, and Florida do this, but again, the thresholds are very different and the rules are very different, and Connecticut's really crappy for that. But these are, New York doesn't have personal property tax, but they have other taxes. So working with somebody just to get yourself set up right will take so much weight off your shoulders. And then you can go forth and be creative, because you're not sitting there going, oh my God, did I miss something?
I'm all about that. That sounds like a good life.
Yeah, it's tough. And because we have 50 states plus DC and Puerto Rico, we've got like 52 fiefdoms. And within actually like 52 countries, and within those countries are fiefdoms. Like Ohio is miserable for tax purposes. Pennsylvania is not much better. But you've got all these pieces, and if you can talk to somebody who specializes in your state, it'll just save you so much headache and heartache down the road. Another thing, actually, if you even know, if that is out of financial reach, another thing you can do is either go to your local SBDC, Small Business Development Cooperative, or SCORE, it's like retired executive types who help you with your business. And they're both free services. But places like SBDC, particularly if they're on the ground, because you usually get a consultant or a mentor who's in your area, they can help walk you through this stuff, because they're helping new businesses get started or established businesses. You go to another level, but they're aware of what's going on in your locality.
Those are great. I have heard of SCORE. I haven't heard of the other one, but I have heard of SCORE. And I know that we also here in Alabama, well, in Birmingham specifically, we have a small business development, and they have a women's development specifically, even like it's for women's businesses, which is kind of cool. So yeah, I know that those things do exist. And so yeah, take advantage of those.
Yeah, your tax dollars are paying for them, so you might as well use these services. And depending on the part of the country you're in, even the area you're in, one may be stronger than the other. When I was in Connecticut, I got more value out of working with SBDC, but here in Florida, I had more value working with SCORE.
Right, and get other people's opinions that have used them like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and find out and reach out, and they'll probably tell you to join your Chamber of Commerce. You don't have to do that, but just pick their brains and say, okay, what do I need to know so that I'm running my business legally and I'm on the up and up, and that way you just, again, limiting the surprises and using the resources you have,
and lessening the fear of going to IRS jail.
IRS jail.
For those of us, when we first got started in that kind of thing, we were relying heavily on the tax softwares. Is that a good choice for people who are independent authors and creatives, or not so much?
Well, here's the thing. It can, if you are bent on doing it and determined to do it yourself, the one that I found that usually has the least amount of errors in it, when clients come over to me, they've been doing it themselves, and then they give me the return and I input it and look at it. The one that I've seen that has been the best, if you will, has been the HR Block Tax Cut. I'm not an advocate for them. They don't pay me to say any of that. Nobody pays me to say any of these things, right? But that one has been the cleanest. The most famous one out there, who I will not name, That one, I actually played around with it for a friend for her kids years ago. And I found it so daunting and confusing. And I do this for a living. So I'm like, how do normal people even look at this and like understand what the heck is going on? And so the tax cut has been the one that I've seen that has been least error prone, I guess. Some people use Tax Slayer. They also have a professional software. I don't know anything about them, but that's one if you want another one to explore. And however, you may want to just be careful and look and see where you can find a tax person, because here's what's interesting with a lot of these softwares. They're like, oh, well, it only costs this much, and then you have to add a state, and then you have to do this. And after that, you've already spent a couple $100 in software, and you're getting no guidance. And sometimes, and a lot of times, you may be able to find a tax person who can do it for a similar or maybe a bit more, right? Or it could be a lot more, but you're getting guidance.
Yeah.
And that can make a big difference.
Oh, for sure. And then you're building that relationship for maybe future endeavors as well. So absolutely.
And somebody to have questions to ask as things come up here, which is really, really important, because things will come up.
Mm-hmm.
On the tax client side, what I do is I send emails out, because first quarter we always cover anyway during tax season. But second quarter, third, and fourth, I'm like, hey, did you get married? Did you get divorced? Did you have a baby? Is your business doing better? Is it doing worse? Did you change jobs? Did you move? And it might trigger you to ask some questions like, oh yeah, that did happen. Maybe I should ask about that. Or people will say, I'm thinking of taking money out of my retirement account. I'm like, okay, well, let's explore what that's going to look like if you do that, particularly because they are, under 59 and a half. What is that going to do? Are you okay with those consequences? So these are where tax people, we earn our keep by entering the numbers correctly in a software, but we also earn it by fixing problems before they actually happen.
Which is huge and so important. And I appreciate the fact that it's available, because and also just having that human interaction and connection, because when you do it through the softwares, it's like, do you have questions? And then you have to click a link, and then you have to read all these things. And I don't understand half the words they're using when I'm looking over his shoulder going, I don't know what that means. What do you want from me? Just tell me what you want from me.
Yeah, well, and that's the problem. And that's the inherent problem with software, is it's only as good as the person entering the data understands the question.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes for tax preparers too, because I've seen some very messy, in quotes, professionally prepared returns that I've had to clean up and undo. And so you have to understand why something is going where it goes, to make sure that the numbers are right, because otherwise you could double entry. You could overstate your income and now you're paying more tax than you should. You could actually take too many deductions, and you do it in two places on the tax return because you didn't realize it went there, and now you have a notice. And how do you fix that? And I think we talked about this before we started recording, but I would consider and suggest that people, if you're looking for somebody, don't go to Uncle Bob's barber's cousin's friend who kind of does it on the side. We do have professional organizations, and as tax people, we're really crappy at marketing, as a whole, except if we're trying to sell you big deductions, right? But the people who are actually on the ground preparing returns, check out National Association of Tax Professionals, because these are people who belong to a professional organization. You can search it by, I think you can search by specialty. NAEA, which is National Association of Enrolled Agents, you can search there by specialty. NATP, I don't remember, but you can at least search by zip code or by location, so you can find somebody in your area who knows your laws.
Nice. All right, there was only one question left, and I saved it for last because it was one that my husband specifically asked. He was like, this is the question that I need answered. And because it was a surprise. He came up, there was a surprise, what was it? I don't know. His question was, are there any gotchas for indie authors or other artists that they need to be aware of? For instance, there was a surprise to find that if you pay for services to an individual, in this case, we were talking about my editor, and that fee is over $600, you have to report that to the IRS in January, and you're late if you do so in February, and are in trouble if you don't do it at all.
Yeah, so that 1099. So yes, we talked about this, that you'll get them if they're over $600 at yourself, but What about the issuing? Or if like you subcontract out some work, right? Or you pay an editor, which would be the most common, or the book cover designer. So the best, you need to have them fill out, anybody you're working with that in that capacity, you have them fill out what's called a W-9. It's available on the IRS website, and that gathers all their information, their business, the business information, either their social if they're working as themselves, or their EIN, employer identification number, if they're working under, an LLC. So that when you go to issue said 1099, you already have the data and you're not chasing them. And you are required to do this for individuals, and you're required to do this for LLCs that are functioning as disregarded entities, sole proprietors. So you don't have to do this if people are S Corps or C Corps. You don't have to do that. But what you do is you collect that information, and then by January 31st, you're required to issue it. Now, IRS has a tool to do this, and some people like it and some don't. Actually, they have two tools, and one is really good and one is bad. I don't use that. I wouldn't bother with that. I mean, personally, some people love it. I'm not going to do that. So there are many websites online where you can do your own 1099. Some clients pay me to do it. Some of my clients do it themselves. It's it's not that complicated, the 1099. Like, of all of the things in the tax world, that issuing your own 1099s, I'd feel comfortable to giving anybody who can just add up what they owed they paid somebody, like an editor. So I've used a bunch of different services over the years. Right now, I like Tax Bandits, plural. They got a little like raccoon as their mascot. Kind of hokey, but it works. And there you can just issue the 1099s, and you can email them to people. Right. Or you can even select the extra box to mail them. And it's like $5 per person.
Yeah, that was just a surprise to him because he was like, oh, I have to do this. And I thought, oh, I'm glad you looked at it because I didn't know.
Yeah. And if you're, by the way, if this is a question that also comes up, if you're subcontracting or editing work to people overseas, like who never, ever step foot in the U.S., you are not required to issue a 1099 to those people. So just so you know, or some people have a VA that's sitting in the Philippines. That's pretty common now because it's less expensive labor, and English can be their first language. You do not have to issue a 1099 to a VA over there because they're never stepping foot in the U.S. You mark it. It is a deduction. What I usually record that as is outside services. So
interesting. Well, thank you. That was exactly the answer that I am sure he was looking for.
There are a couple more gotchas that I did want to bring up.
Yes.
And that I thought of beyond that. And the first was the thing we've talked about a couple of times, which is make sure your income that you're tracking and your 1099s that you're not double reporting them. And also be aware that having lumpy income, which is really often in the creative space, that the thing is that when you receive a payout from something, put aside a percentage of it so that you can pay income tax, pay your estimated taxes, because you'll be really happy that you stuck it to the side so you're not surprised at tax time. And get in the habit of making estimated quarterly payments. Because again, you're not going, this is different depending on if you're writing full time, if you're writing as a side business, if you're just getting started. But if you're in a space where you find that you're owing every year, and also it's giving you stress because you know you're going to owe every year, get into the habit, and this you can talk with an accountant about, I cover it in my program, but getting in the habit of making those estimated payments so that you don't struggle at tax time.
Yeah, because those payments, they can surprise you how big they can get at the end. It's like, yeah, I had a great year, but not anymore.
Not anymore, because all of my profits now have to go to IRS. Yeah.
Sorry.
So, yeah, and that we also need to think about. And part of working with people is smoothing that out, because it is weird. Like, and sometimes some of the people that I work with, they're going along and they're not making a lot, but they have a huge body of work behind them. And boom, these big royalty checks hit. And they're uneven and nobody knows when they're coming. They just kind of like show up. So we have to tax manage around that.
To plan accordingly, and just like you said, just as soon as it comes in, just start making plans. Like I have reminders in my phone that when I know that the royalties are normally paid from Amazon or from other businesses that I have that are just like passive income or whatever, I'm like, oh, be sure you take that off and put it to the side because, it's easy to, especially if it's not an account that you monitor every single day, because I don't look at it every single day. And so I have to have those reminders to be like, hey, guess what came in today?
And another thing is if your revenue so far from your writing business isn't really high and you have another job, you can also, if you don't want to make quarterlies, you can adjust up your withholding in your W-2 job to cover that income. So you're not stuck making quarterlies and having to remember. Now, sometimes that's not possible anymore when you're starting to crank some revenue. But in the meantime, if you can, that's another way to rectify the problem.
Yeah, like when you're making $20, $25 a month from Amazon, then,
yeah,
you're not too big number
on that. No.
Yeah.
No. But then you have a month where you have something come in and it's $3,000.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And let's say, you're in your W-2 job, you're making 60 or 70,000 and your writing business is bringing in 6. Well, guess what? You're still going to be paying income tax and self-employment tax, but you could maybe eke out enough of tax spread out over your 26 weeks in your other job, because it really doesn't hurt as much to have an extra, $10 taken out of your pay period, for example, as opposed to having to come up with the 260 at the end of the year.
Yeah.
If you're on a 26-week pay period. So these are the things we need to consider. Like if I get people who have a big tax bill, it's like, well, if we break this up over all your pay periods, you won't have this next year.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So, Kristin, tell us how listeners can connect with you and your work, whether it's your website or social media, all of that.
So I try to keep it really simple. It's Her Money Solutions is my website, and at Her Money Solutions is my Instagram. And you can find me at Kristin Delfau on LinkedIn if you're over there. And I am on Facebook as Her Money Solutions as well, and as myself. So I'm pretty easy to find. But my website gives you a lot of information about what I'm doing and who and how to help, and has that awesome free checklist as well as the link to my program. So that's how you can find me wherever you need to. And I have a little query box. So if you have questions, you can get me there.
Yes, and you can sign up for the program that we were just talking about. You want to talk about how to sign up and what the deadline is for that?
Sure. So Deducted is a program I run 3 times a year. It's for solo entrepreneurs and independent contractors, understanding how to run your business, deduct things on your taxes legally, all of this good stuff. The next round, I'm right in the middle of a round right now, but the next round will start January 10th. And my regular price is $595 for 4 weeks of live programs, plus there's some bonus videos and all sorts of things that'll teach you how to do that 1099. I actually walk through it on Tax Bandits, and a bunch of other stuff is in there, plus a spreadsheet talking what we had talked about, helping you record the income and expenses so you don't have to deal with your bank statements in painfully at the end of the year. And for listeners, I've done a $100 coupon. The coupon code is CONNECTED, and that will run through December 31st. If you sign up by December 31st, you get the $100 off, and you can join me. We'll talk about tax. We'll make it fun. Do it as in plain English, not boring, and get you the information you need so you're not worrying so much anymore.
No, that's great. And obviously, just through this conversation alone, you can tell that we're going to sign up for that program, and we're very easily going to understand the information that you've presented, because it's going to be step by step. It's going to be broken down, and we're not using all of this technical jargon that just goes right over our heads.
Yeah, I hate the technical jargon too. I mean, we have in our industry, we have people that are called code quoters, and they can quote IRS tax code. And I'm just like, wow, you're very impressive. I can't do that.
Well, maybe that works in their arena, but if I'm talking to you, I don't know what that means. So you just sound like a dictionary.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, wow, you're knowledgeable. But they could be telling you something that it could be the completely wrong code. That's sometimes I'm sitting there going, I'm taking this at face value, you know what you're doing. And then I write it down. I'm like, I'm going to make sure you know what you're talking about.
And the rest of us are like, google.com. Thank you.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, Kristin, you've had all this time, and I mean, we've had a good long conversation. So you've had all this time to think about the answer to the big question.
Yeah.
So are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Okay. What is one piece of advice or encouragement you want listeners to walk away with if they hear nothing else?
I want them to walk away, just start with something. If you feel overwhelmed by all this business stuff and all the tax stuff and all the whatever stuff, start somewhere. If you haven't opened a business bank account and a separate credit card, or have a credit card just designated only for business, start there. That'll make your life so much easier. And it's a baby step to getting all these other pieces to fall in line. And if that is daunting, just go with something I keep on a post-it on my desk: momentum over motivation. Because I know it is not motivating to reconcile your books. I hate it myself. But get the momentum to just get these pieces in order. And then your business can grow and it can flourish because you can make better decisions, business decisions about your creativity, because you have numbers in front of you.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And how do you build momentum? You have to take that first step. You have to take that first movement into a direction. And once you've started it, then it can build on itself. And then you find the motivation. And, sometimes as creatives, that motivation is hard to come by, but you take that first step and it just starts flowing.
Exactly.
Gosh. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation. And I hope that, well, listen, if somebody walks away not learning something, that's on them, because there was something for everybody in this time that we have spent together.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, because I know what it's like. And it stinks when you're trying to figure all this out. It's tough. But once you get it under control, like, your creativity it's so much easier when you're not worrying about all this other stuff.
Absolutely. Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you again. And I will put all of your information in the show notes, so it'll be simple as clicking a button. And we'll make sure that we have enough time leading up to the deadline for enrollment for your next program enrollment time. And that coupon code for $100 off is connected. It will also be in the show notes. And I just look forward to working with you in the future and just, learning from you, because I know you've got great things on the horizon, especially when you get that parents program written.
Yeah, I'll get there.
No pressure. I'm just messing with you.
No, I know. No worries at all.